If there's one company that's been really disappointing me in these past few years, it's Sega. Nowadays it feels as if for every good game they release, a bad one is guaranteed to follow. I've seen this happen to Sonic with Sonic Forces, Yakuza with the Kiwami games, and the Panzer Dragoon remake, and even Shenmue 3. While not all of these were directly made by Sega themselves, they're still connected to the company's history in both major and minor ways. However, out of all of these games, the one that hurt me the most was Shin Sakura Wars for the PS4. What should have been a faithful revival to a series that had its last main entry over 15 years ago turned out to be a soulless bastardization that spat all over the series' legacy by pandering to a very specific crowd. And it's a damn shame too, because the original Sakura Wars series was something truly unique and special, and the impact it had on Sega as a company is undeniable. It quickly became popular, becoming their 11th best-selling franchise to date, having shipped around 4.5 million copies by 2019, which is quite impressive considering only a single game was ever released outside of Japan, where it did really poorly. Aside from the new one, of course. As you can imagine, success comes with a fair share of milking, and milk it they did, producing a plethora of anime, manga, and spin-offs. Having played through the main series a couple of years back, I recently decided to replay them all to reaffirm myself exactly where the new game went wrong. However, what was supposed to be a simple series marathon quickly became a Sisyphean task, as I decided to not only go through the mainline games, but also all of the noteworthy spin-offs and every single anime. The only thing that I won't be talking about in this video are the manga, as I have to draw a line somewhere so as to not go insane, though I'm very much hyperbolizing here. So here I am now, having gone through the entire franchise in the span of just a couple of months, about to review all of it in a single video. Did I gain something from it after all? Who knows? But for now, I think it'd be best to start with the game that started it all. Sakura Taisen was the brainchild of Oji Hiroi, and was created under the direction of Yasushi Takeuchi, who also brought on a lot of pretty famous people for the project, such as Satoru Akahori as the writer, best known for some show called Saber Marionette that I have never heard of until now. Kosuke Fujishima, known for his work on the Tales series as the character designer, and Kohei Tanaka as a composer, who was also known for his works on Gunbuster and some mecha anime, as well as One Piece, all of which I have never seen. If you couldn't tell by now, I don't really watch anime. And by that I mean I watch like a third of one, once every 5 blue moons or so, and then never proceed to finish them. Which might sound weird to some of you, as visually speaking, the games don't do much to differentiate themselves from the average anime game. Yet they still manage to feel unique and distinct, which I believe has a lot to do with the fact that it treats itself with a sort of grounded honesty that is rarely seen in anime-style games. It's a game about humans first and foremost, and all the characters feel like they're living in the world instead of existing solely for the plot. Though I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. To get back on track, I've played some games that Tanaka composed for, namely the Gravity Rush duology and Alundra, and I can very much vouch for the quality of both the games and their soundtracks, because they are fantastic. But I digress. This is about all the meta information I am willing to regurgitate from the game's Wikipedia page, so I'd say it's about time we move on to the game itself. Because it is the first game in the series and it laid the groundwork for pretty much everything to come, I'm going to go into most of the themes and details here, as well as switching between the different versions of the game when fitting, starting with the English fan translation of the Sega Saturn original. The game is set in a fictionalized version of the Taito era in Japan, where steam is so potent that it made humanity advance thrice as quickly as in real life. The game starts off with the protagonist, Imperial Navy Ensign Ichiro Ogami, being sent to lead a super secret squad that protects the capital. After meeting up with the series' poster child, Sakura Shinguchi, she tells him that they're going to the Imperial Theater, which immediately introduces us to the game's main mechanic, the lip system, where you're given a rather short window of time to select one of several responses to a conversation, which will yield a different reaction depending on whoever you're talking to. Positive reactions are usually signalized with a cheerful jingle, and negative ones usually with a trumpet of shame. The longer the jingle goes on for signifies how much it impacted your relation to the person you're talking to. There are multiple types of lips, other than just a regular one, but I'll get to them when the time comes. It's a really well implemented system, and I think the split-second decision making adds a lot to what would otherwise be a simple yes or no question system you would see in something like a modern Persona game. The idea is fundamentally the same, but the execution is what really makes the lip system stand out from the regular visual novel affair. Anyway, Sakura escorts us to the theater and we're introduced to some of the other squad mates. Iris, the little girl character who sees Ogami as a sort of father figure. Sumire, a fucking whore. And Maria, a hardened soldier whom you stole the position of squad leader from, and is pretty much the only one who you actually need to gain the trust and respect of first. It makes sense as she already knows how hard it is to be a SWAT leader and she'll be very critical toward you, and it leads to some really well written interactions between her and Ogami. Throughout the game, 2 more girls join the squad, those being Kana Kirishima, the tomboy, and Koran Lee, the inventor. All of them get around the same amount of screen time and character development throughout the games as 10 chapters, which are all about 40 minutes long, ending with a big combat sequence. Every girl gets her own chapter centered around them, their personal struggles, and inner feelings. These chapters usually end up allowing you to exponentially raise your trust with them, as well as helping make them feel human, as I mentioned earlier. And all of them get their own dedicated ending if they have the highest affinity towards Ogami that reinforces the impact that he has had on them as people. And it's usually quite nice. Despite being classified as a dating sim, the romantic aspects of the game's dialogue are never really all that prominent, and it isn't until the 4th entry that it becomes an actual focus. Sakura Wars is probably one of the single most wholesome series I've ever played through. End up caring about all of the girls quite a bit, and seeing them grow as people thanks to Ogami's guidance while moving on from the traumatic experiences that hold them back was genuinely heartwarming. All this culminates in a final chapter that had me genuinely shocked at how much emotional impact it had and just how well it was executed, so I refused to even slightly touch on it any further as to avoid spoilers. It's really just that good. As you've most likely already noticed from the footage, I have now switched to the PS2 remake of the game, as it adds a lot of quality of life improvements from the later installments, and it's also generally much nicer looking. But it's sadly only in Japan, so if you want to play this version instead, you'll have to deal with that, unless you understand the language, of course. As you move through the theater, 2 more types of lips are introduced. One of them is the click lips, where you have point and click styled moments where you can look at the girl's body and shit, or just cut the creepy shit and talk to them. Don't worry, being overly creepy toward them will heavily decrease their liking of Ogami, so horn dogs can get the fuck out. The other is the multi-lips, in which you'll have to complete several lips back to back in a certain time window. The lips used in it can also consist of several types and don't always have to be the regular ones, even if that's the case more often than not. With the gameplay out of the way, we can now return to the plot. As it turns out, there is no combat troupe, and instead it's a theater troupe, and your boss is a massive drunkard, and you're a ticket clipper. Of course there's more to it than just that, but I don't feel like going into the details right now. Sometimes the game will also swap to these nicely animated cutscenes, though there are only very few of them in both this game and the sequel. But at least the first one leads into an interesting lips, so it's not all bad.
Sakura-san? 人の着物の裾を踏みつけるなんて失礼じゃありませんこと？すみません。まったく、これだから田舎臭い人は嫌ですわ。そやてお下品で。さあ、もう一度初めから行くわよ。ごめんあそばせ。このガキ、さくらさん、口で言ってわからない人はこうよ。
After a bunch of shenanigans, it turns out that the troupe was actually real all along. Oh, who could have guessed? And now we've reached the main reason I even decided to get into these games, the SRPG mech combat. for which we will be swapping to the PSP version, because it's the only one that allows for text skipping, and I don't feel like playing through the first chapter in Saturn again. Also, the remake's combat uses the system from 3 and Beyond, so I can't use that either. The combat to Sakura Wars is incredibly simple. If you've played a strategy RPG before, you know exactly what you're getting into. Think Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, but much simpler. There are only basic attacks and specials, and your defensive capabilities consist of only defending, or healing, or even recharging your super move energy. Every character can move twice per turn, and fights are usually very easy. There's really nothing else to it, to be honest, but there's still two things that make the combat really fun. For one, Ogami is able to protect a girl on your squad from every attack 7 times, both negating them taking any damage whatsoever, as well as heavily increasing your affinity to them, unlike letting them die, which obviously lowers it. It allows you to raise the affinity and future mood of other girls without neglecting the one whose ending you'd like to get. It's by far the most unique thing this game's combat has to offer, but you'd be surprised how much it actually affects the way you'd approach any given situation. The other factor that affects combat in major ways is, well, your affinity to the individual girls that I mentioned earlier. Depending on how often you raise their trust in the past few episodes, their mood will improve. If they're in high spirits, their strength and defense will increase for the next battle, and if they're feeling bad, their stats will be lowered. With this, the game encourages you to keep your affinities with every girl high, while also telling you to go apeshit with Ogami and your main girl on the front lines, because in all honesty, there's only one way to actually take care of the bosses in this game. Gangbanging. Gangbanging is a scientifically proven surefire way to drive off any demonic spawn from the 10th circle of hell. Just blow a couple of bullets into their forehead from every side and you'll have won in no time. Some people might call this strategy cheap and boring. I call that BDSM. After a battle has been won, the squad always has to do one thing without fail. And after that, we get a small epilogue and an animated sequence telling us what to expect from the next chapter, or as the game likes to call them, episodes. It's comparable to a Saturday morning superhero slice of life mix show with a monster of the week formula. Think something like Scooby-Doo, but instead of a talking dog, they're steam-powered bipedal war machines. Every episode also changes in both minor and major ways depending on what you do within them. Between major events, you'll have 3 movement sections where you're free to walk around the theater as you please and get to talk to the girls at your leisure. But you'll never be able to see every event, as going somewhere and having an event play out always takes 5 minutes. You usually get around 1 hour of in-game time in these scenes though, so you sometimes get more or less depending on the current episode and the last major event to have transpired. But once the clock hits a certain time, Ogami will automatically rush to where you're supposed to go, and the story will continue. Because of this, it's important that you carefully think about who you'd like to talk with, as your choice affects which events will play out later on. Alongside this, all of your decisions and relationships to the girls and a lot of events will change, in both minor and major ways, usually involving the top 3 members or the lowest member. Fujishima's art and Tanaka's music are essential to the game's tone and atmosphere. Where the former helps the game keep a grounded aesthetic with simple yet very expressive character and environmental designs appropriate for the time period the games are set in, the latter helps emphasize the current mood of a situation. And, well, that's all there really is to say about Sakura Taisen 1. It's really good and I like it a lot. It's a fantastic place to get into the series and I couldn't recommend it enough. If you just want to play something wholesome to pick yourself up after having a rough day, I can't recommend this game enough. Sakura Taisen 2 Kimi Shin Tamo Koto Nakare, or Sakura Wars 2 Thou Shalt Not Die in English, is the second game in the series, and it's honestly just more of the same, so I really don't want to waste much time on it. The gameplay has stayed nearly identical to the first, so I won't even get into it. The story immediately starts by spoiling the last two, so I can't talk much about that either. What I can say is that it introduces two new members to the Imperial Floral Assault Squad Flower Division, being Orihime, the most annoying Italian to ever grace video games, and Reni, the most stoic German to ever grace video games. I'm not a fan of either, even if my heritage would have you believe otherwise, and while they do get some character development later on, it's not nearly as interesting or well executed as in the first game. Where the first game's characters shined and from how well their personalities played off of one another, these two don't affect the cast's dynamic at all, and their personalities at the end of the game remain nearly identical to how they were at the beginning. You could cut them from the game completely and the story would be no different. They feel shoehorned in for the sake of having new characters, and it shows. And that's basically all this game is. With its 12 chapters, it's by far the longest game in the series, but at the same time, it also reuses a lot of plot points from the first game. At this time, they're self-aware about it, and that's somehow supposed to excuse the laziness. It plays the same, but looks way worse. It's much more awkwardly paced, has much more bawling villains. The humor isn't as funny, and even the music isn't nearly as memorable as the first, with the exception of these two really great tracks. As mentioned before, another major downgrade was the main villain. While he doesn't really have a lot to do until around episode 8 of the first game, Aoi Satan is seen quite a lot in the background, and it's obvious that he's up to more than he lets on, so it's a great payoff when he actually starts doing stuff. The new villain casually appears once halfway through the game, does shit for 2 chapters, takes his suicide medicine, and then comes back in the final one. It's silly and forced as hell because they set him up by having this one of his minions kill the first game's main antagonist, and that's just at the very beginning of the game, but he just doesn't really do anything. It's by no means a bad game, but it's certainly not the great sequel it could have been, and had this been the end of the series, it would have been one hell of an anticlimactic finale. But thankfully, it wasn't, and what we got next was a massive step up in every way. Sakura Taisen 3 Is Paris Burning is unanimously agreed upon being the best game in the franchise. Aside from being named after a thing that Hitler once said, it also features a brand new cast and setting. At the end of the last game, Ogami is sent to Paris on account of the Navy. Soon after arriving there, he almost gets run over, and we get the first anime cutscene that now transitions into a ellipse much smoother than it did in the first. These kinds of scenes are also a lot more plentiful than in the first, and this is to this day still the Sakura Wars game with the most animated cutscenes. Directly after this, Ogami immediately runs into the new poster child of the series, specifically the Sakura Wars Paris saga, Erika Fontaine, a very clumsy nun in training who immediately proceeds to run against the wall. After going to the embassy to meet the Japanese ambassador, we are then brought to a local theater called the Chat Noir, which is actually the base of operations of the Paris Floral Assault Troop. And then we're gradually introduced to the other cast members in each chapter. In order they are Glycine, some noble bitch, Coquelicot, a Vietnamese child soldier, Lobelia, a thief, murderer, prostitute, assassin and con artist with an actual 1000-year prison sentence, and Hanabi, the depressed one, who I always forget about. Having lowered the number of girls to just 5 has allowed the team to really focus their ideas into the game's 11 chapters and give us easily the most believable and well-developed cast in the series. Lobelia actually ended up as my personal favorite character just because of how well she plays off of everyone else in the squad, like when Erika constantly pushes herself onto her because she believes there's good inside of everyone, or when they have to detain her during a victory pose, but all of them are great. Without taking away too much, there is this 3-chapter-long part of the game where the group has to really learn how to work together as a team, so the old characters come back to teach them, and those are easily the best chapters in the game, and or sort of a passing of the torch, if you will. Maria ends up teaching them about the importance of strategy, Kana shows them new combat techniques, and Koran helps the mechanics upgrade the Kobu, which are the mechs in these games. Sakura, Sumire, and Isis show them the importance of teamwork, and even Orihime and Reni come in and make themselves useful as a two-woman recon squad. It's also really great to compare their motivations at the start of the game to the ones at the end. The character-specific chapters are as fleshed out as ever and give much more insight into characters' personalities than they ever did before. The sheer amount of minor things they add does a lot to make these characters feel believable. Glycine being worried about the fact that she might not be able to live up to her heritage makes her fearful disassociation from the group to the outside world feel honest. Kellycut's longing for a real family and life filled with abuse make it quite impactful when she finally joins, and Hanabi overcoming the grief of losing her fiancé are just some of the plentiful character moments this game gives that help add a very believable dynamic to the cast. On that note, I should probably mention that the first game's ending was absolutely batshit insane and went completely off the wall, and while 2's wasn't nearly as weird, 3 cranks it back up again. It's really good. Really, really good. Though I'll admit that it's still not as good as the first game's ending, but by just a bit. All the great character development and whatnot is really exemplified within the victory poses. You can clearly tell that no one but Ogami is really sure what's actually happening, but they end up warming up to it. It's really cute. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I should probably address the gameplay, since a lot has changed since the last game. But all of the changes are good changes. The new system is called ARMS, and unlike before, the battles are actually consistently fun now. Instead of a classical grid-like system with certain spots you can move on to, everything now works off of the Kobu's energy tank. You can fully move around as long as you have enough energy and can attack with the remaining energy. You can chain up to 5 hits back to back for a combo if you have some more left, and you can do it again. Using a special only uses up 1 energy tank as well, so you can also use it to completely demolish bosses, as indiscriminate gangbanging is still the only viable way to deal with them. Protecting allies is gone now, instead you're able to infinitely heal yourself. However, it takes a shit ton of energy to actually do so. You can also swap between several battle plans for added bonus, stat increases and decreases for every situation. But I never did that, so I don't know how useful they are or not. Co-op attacks were a thing in the last game and they're back here. Whenever a character attacks an enemy within the attack radius of another ally, the ally will sometimes come to their aid for additional damage. However, there's no real consistency to when and why they co-op, as it is mostly randomized. Sometimes they'll do it, and sometimes they don't. There's also the super co-op attack you can do with the girl that's currently trusts you the most, which was also a thing in the last 2 games, but I never used that either, as the damage dealt with it is much smaller than just using both of the special attacks individually. All things considered, this battle system is a massive improvement compared to what came before. The game looks nicer, plays better, and hell, this game also happened to have some of the best tracks in the series. It's quite obvious why this game is considered the peak of the Sakura Wars franchise, which is why it breaks my heart to say that Sakura Taisen 4, Fall in Love Maidens, is the weakest entry into the franchise. Being the grand finale to the Ogami saga, this game had a lot to live up to, which it simply didn't, or rather, couldn't. The only thing it does well is have a really touching ending, and that's it. Right from the start, the game throws 2 major red flags into your face. For one, both the cast from the first 2 games and the Paris cast are back for a total of 13 girls, all with their own individual ending. But none of them get nearly any screen time anymore, as it is mostly given to Sakura. And even she doesn't get that much of it because of the other red flag. This game is barely 5 hours long, with only 3 chapters. Bear in mind that the last 3 games were all at least 20 to 30 hours long. No one gets any actual character development here, and while some of the best arrangements come from this game, it's just not worth it. The main villain is some old fuck who apparently founded Tokyo or some shit, and now he wants to destroy it for some reason that's never fully explained. The biggest plot thread here is that Ogami has to fully produce the theater's next play, being Les Miserables, while focusing on the theme of marriage specifically. That's the big thing here, marriage. This is the game where Ogami finally settles down and marries one of the girls. It's incredibly weird to me that the game that most heavily focuses on the romantic elements is arguably the one that needs the characters to grow the most, and somehow ended up as the most bland and uninspired one. Even the gameplay has been left nearly unchanged from the last entry, and if you skip just one of them, yeah, please, just skip this one. It's a kind of really sad note to end on, coming off of the fantastic Sakura Wars 3, but thankfully, they decided to give it one last go by soft rebooting the series and bringing in a lot of plot elements that were cut from the last game, while still keeping the original continuity intact. Sakura Wars 5, So Long My Love, is the first and only game in the franchise to ever get officially localized, on both of its release platforms, being the Wii and the PS2, and it was received quite well actually. Being a soft reboot allows the game to be fairly standalone, which is great. Only Sakura and Ogami make brief cameo appearances at the start of the game, and from that point onward it's all new characters, with the exception of Kamiyama, who I am convinced is only there for fanservice. Basically, you play as Shinjiro Taiga, the son of Ogami's older sister, who was only briefly mentioned once at the end of the 4th game. She appears once in the anime as well, we'll be discussing that later, but she's a total badass, so it's cool in my book. Taiga is being sent to New York to command the newly formed Star Division, New York Defense Troop, in Ogami's place. He ends up getting involved in a robbery with some cowboy chick, and she then chucks him the money, and he's promptly arrested. All things considered, it doesn't sound too bad for a setup, but here's the catch. The game is not a good entry point for new-time players, and the first 4 chapters are a complete slog. There's a lot of reasons for this, such as Taiga's personality for most of the early game. To put it bluntly, he's an idiot with a heart of gold. I'm not going to pretend Ogami wasn't kind of a dumbass, in fact he was a real goofball, but especially in 4 and 3, but Taiga just lets the girls do whatever they want with him whenever they feel like, and it honestly gets annoying. Especially because all but 2 of them will be massive assholes toward him until the end of their chapter, where they suddenly all fall in love with him. It's silly, it's forced, and I hate it. And on the topic of the girls, while they all have at least some really cool stuff to them, you find it all out just a little too late into their own chapters, as opposed to sprinkling personality traits and foreshadowing into their free movement dialogue, like in the prior games, which the game does still do, but only with 2 of them, namely Gemini, the main poster child girl thingy, and Diana. The music is of course still fantastic, and the gameplay basically just refined the ARM system, which is the new battle system from the last 2 games, while also bringing back the ally defending from the first 2 games. On top of this, the mid to late game is bloody fantastic, and I really enjoyed how this game specifically went about delivering the series' message of no one being left behind, as self-sacrifice is not an option. It's great stuff. Taiga also gets some really good character development once he's reached good terms with all the girls, and I actually ended up liking him quite a bit. So if you really wanted to, you could consider the first 4 episodes a very slow build-up for a fantastic payoff present in the last 4 episodes. It's probably the 2nd worst paced game in the series because of this, but I'd still say I like it more than 2 simply because the actual ending portion of the game was so well executed, and it's rather refreshing to have another completely new setting rather than just retreading old ground. And with this, we have covered the entire mainline, and it's time to rank them, from best to worst. I'd say on the top is Sakura Wars 3, then 1, then 5, then 2, and lastly 4. All of them are good except 4, and if you only have to skip one, as I said before, 4! Skip 4! No, seriously, skip 4! The best place to start is easily the first game though, but 5 is also fine if you can get past the very, very boring early game. But of course, the main line isn't all there is to Sakura Wars, and I think it's about time we started talking about the spin-offs. Sakura Taisen Game Boy is the first of these, and unsurprisingly it's a Sakura Wars game for the Game Boy Color. Crazy, I know! Anyway, in this game you play as some random ass dude who is not Ogami, and it's best compared to the first two games, except uglier. These are some of the ugliest sprite reimaginings for a Game Boy game I've ever seen. When the Donkey Kong Land title screen looks better than this, you know you kinda fucked up. Surprisingly though, the music doesn't make me want to blow my ears out, and it's at the very least competent. The protagonist being someone completely new who actually interacts with Ogami was something I thought was pretty cool, as it allows for you to kinda look at him from an outsider's perspective, while also allowing you to sort of try and predict how you react to the lips from how he would have reacted in the main games where you play as him. If you really needed to scratch that Sakura Wars itch on the go, well, I guess this isn't the worst way to do it. I don't really think this game needed to exist, and it doesn't really add anything to the grander story or themes or the series in general, but at the very least I can say that you would definitely not have any issues playing this on an original Game Boy Color without backlit screen, though that begs the question of why you would even want to do that. It also ended up getting a sequel in the form of Sakura Taisen GBGB Hibi 2. Something, I can't read that. It's more of the first game, not too unlike the actual Sakura Wars 2, and you can once again play as a nameless new guy. Not much I can really say about this one except that the sprite work looks much better now. Too bad that better doesn't equal good, so it's about time we moved on, as my eyes can only take this much abuse. Sakura Taisen Columns and Sakura Taisen Columns 2 are essentially reskins of Columns with Sakura Wars theme and some classic social sim segments, but really, if you've played Columns before, you know exactly what you're in for. And I'm sure these are great games and all, but I don't like Columns, so I'd like to move on now. In conclusion, this is the closest thing we'll ever get to a puzzle fighter with Street Fighter 3 characters, as it has Kana, and she looks similar enough to Makoto. Now we're finally getting into the interesting stuff. Sakura Taisen Monogatari Mysterious Paris is a sort of sequel to the third game, with some new characters and the entirety of the old cast minus Ogami. It's a mystery point-and-click adventure game and thus features no combat. It revolves around the disappearance of one of the protagonist's friends, family members. I couldn't really make that part out, to be honest. But either way, it's a mystery about kidnapping and it's really cool and I liked it. If you like Sakura Wars 3's cast and you want more outside of the anime, then yeah, this is a great way to get more. Sakura Taisen 5 Episode 0 is a prequel story to the 5th game and revolves entirely around Gemini. It's an action hack and slash, and I'll be honest, it has neither action nor hack and slash. Even after beating the game twice on the hardest difficulty, I still don't know what's going on. You're on a horse, and the controls are really awkward and stiff. Attacking feels like really unresponsive, and no matter how hard I press, I can never consistently get the horse to dash. There's regular attacks and special attacks, but they don't really do anything, because all the enemies just stand in place, not doing much of anything at all. And the health pickups are more similar to a beat 'em up than they are an action game. And like, you eat hamburgers and fries to regain your health, and I get it's America and haha fat Americans, but it's really dumb. The only reason anyone should play this game is if they like Gemini, and I mean really like Gemini. Because none of the things that happen in this game have any importance in the main game of 5 at all, whatsoever. So yeah, only play this game if you really have nothing better to do, I guess. It's not fun, but I'm sure you can get some mileage out of it with a bit of alcohol, much like anything. Maybe invite your friends over, stream it, I don't fucking know. And lastly, we have Dramatic Dungeon Sakura Taisen. I kept this one for last as it's canonically the last game in the series, bringing back every girl from the past 5 games with a new story and a grand finale, in the form of a mystery dungeon game. yeah, somehow this doesn't exactly feel right. You'd think the grand celebration to cap off the series would have something like 6th main installment or whatever, but no, it's a mystery dungeon game. The story is interesting enough, I won't deny that, but as a game, it's just really more mystery dungeon, which doesn't have to be a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, I love mystery dungeon, but once you've played one of them, you've pretty much played them all. Randomly generated floors and themed dungeons with a boss at the end, grid-based movement and item drops. But the only thing special about this game is that it still has the lip system from the main games, and also has the co-op attacks, but that's really it. It's definitely worth playing if you're a big fan of the series, but otherwise, you're not going to get much out of it unless you really like mystery dungeon games. And that covers it for the spin-offs. I know I didn't technically cover all of them, as I left some of them out, like Sakura Wars Online, but that's because I tried to focus on the big and important ones that a casual fan might accidentally stumble across. Also, I just didn't really feel like playing and reviewing Mahjong, so that would require me to learn how to play Mahjong, and I'm not about to do that. Try to at least somewhat retain my sanity, you know. So that leaves us with the last topic of today, the anime. Now, I don't usually watch anime, as I mentioned before. So, for this video, I decided to leave my comfort zone and ended up binge watching all 7 of the OVAs, as well as the entire movie, and now I'm going to try to review them. I've never done something like this before, so please bear with me. Oh boy. The first of the Sakura Wars OVA to be made was 1997's Sakura Taisen Uka Kenran, known as Sakura Wars, the gorgeous blooming cherry blossoms in English. Yeah, as it turns out, this thing was actually released outside of Japan as far as I know, making it the very first Sakura Wars media to be localized. The animation is quite solid, and with just 4 episodes, it's really not that long. The first 3 episodes play out as a sort of prequel to the first game, while the last one plays somewhere along the middle of it. I don't have a lot more to say about it, however, it did get a sequel show called Guka Kenran, which is where all the footage you're seeing here is from. It's basically a collection of 6 side stories set during Sakura Wars 2 and 3, and it's quite nice if you like the characters and want to see them some more, so yeah, it's pretty solid. Next up is Sakura Wars TV. This was the first of the shows I watched and is the only one with an actually full-fledged series, with 25 episodes. The first 3 following Sakura start within the Flower Division. And this was where it kind of dawned on me that every Sakura Wars main girl is clumsy as fuck. Sakura at least ended up being more competent than clumsy by the end of the first game, but it's really weird to me that they used the exact same basis for all 3 main girls in the series, but I digress. The show claims to be an adaptation of the first game, but that's bullshit. It's about as much an adaptation of Sakura Wars 1 as the Mario movie is for Luigi's Mansion. The plot is changed in major ways, so that's barely recognizable. It introduces a lot of characters and revelations from the second game, while also removing a lot of major themes and characters from the first, and they even changed the characters' personalities quite a lot. Iris being an especially obvious example, going from a prissy little princess to a shy and anxious girl, and it's really weird for them to do that. I would try to be more specific, but all of the major changes are related to major spoilers for the first game, so all I can say is that it's a bad adaptation but a great standalone show. After the first 3 shows, Sega decided that the best course of action was a theatrical release, so they made Sakura Wars, the movie, a side story taking place sometime between the 3rd and 4th game, and follows Ratchet Altair, who would later reappear as a mentor-type character in So Long My Love. But the movie honestly sucks. The dub is awful, so avoid that if you really have to watch this movie. But it's really not that good. The villains are boring as fuck, Ratchet is a boring character, the old cast is still good but just kind of exists. For some reason the game the anime, force of habit, puts way more focus on Orihime and Rennie than I would have ever expected. It's incredibly mediocre, horribly paced, and you might as well skip it. Aside from the movie, there was also a special one-off OVA called Sakura Taisen Sumire. Unsurprisingly, it's about Sumire. However, it was done more so as a memorial for her voice actress, Michi Tomisawa, due to her retiring from voice acting in the gaming industry. This was the last time she ever voiced Sumire, or rather, was. Until the PS4 game, and its anime adaptation happened, where she returned to voice Sumire one last time. But as you probably noticed by now, I try to pretend they don't exist. Canonically, the OVA plays after the 4th game and follows Sumire as she retires from the Flower Division. It's not bad, but the animation is a little off-putting. And there's really awkward shots. Give it a watch if Sumire is your favorite character, I guess. Now we finally reached the good shit. Sakura Taisen École de Paris is the first of the 2 Sakura Wars 3 related OVAs. The first 2 episodes take place before the game, and while the 3rd and final one takes place in some unspecified time during the game, this is easily the 2nd best show in here, and gives a lot of additional context and short lore for the game, such as how Glacine came to join the review, or how Erika got the idea for the Good Morning dance that you see in the game. It's some genuinely good stuff. And also, during the 2nd episode, there's this weird-ass Dragon Ball Z-esque fight scene where the Japanese ambassador uses a sniper rifle to shoot Lobelia, and the bullet and Lobelia's fire then proceed to have an animate battle in which Lobelia gets shot through the chest and gets physically paralyzed in the most ridiculously over-the-top way possible. I very highly recommend checking this show out if you like the 3rd game. I don't know what else to say. But you might have noticed that I call École the 2nd best show. And that's because the best one, by far, is the other Sakura Wars 3 show, Sakura Taisen Le Nouveau Paris. Set after the events of the 3rd game, it turns out that Ogami actually told every girl they'd become the squad's captain. Once he leaves France, that is. And so, they all have to figure out who the actual captain is now. I really liked how they used Ogami leaving as a catalyst for them to further display their character growth after the game, and the 3 episodes are really fun. There is an overarching plot with some crippled old guy wanting to destroy Paris or some shit, but that's not what the show is about. It's about the girls sticking together and covering up for one another, and if that's not blessed, then I don't know what is. And lastly, there is Sakura Wars New York, New York. Yes, that is the full title. Yes, it is really stupid. This show is weird, man. It takes place after the events of So Long My Love, but instead of focusing on how the ending of the game affected the characters or the state of New York, it's actually about 2 plot strings at once. On one hand, we have Ratchet leaving America, and so Taiga has to jump in as the lead role in the annual exhibition of Cleopatra. He did this whole cross-dressing thing only once in the game, where it was kind of just a joke, and it was all about how hard acting actually is, and if you ever really wanted to interpret it that way, it's also about how creepy Sims can be. But the issue is that here it's pretty much the main focus, and it's really dumb, because Diana suddenly becomes infatuated with him dressed as a girl, wearing glasses for no real reason. The best episode of the show has his mother beating up the ever-living shit out of the entire squad with a broom. So I guess that makes up for it. Sadly, the show kinda even ruins that, because it proceeds to focus on the fact that Taiga gets the main villain to lust over his boy pussy. Which leads me to the 2nd plot string. The main villain, for whatever fucking reason, is Tutankhamun. You know, the guy from ancient Egypt, which is like 5,600 miles away from New York. And it's really dumb. It's not an ancient, like, it's not a bad show or anything, just a really stupid and weird one. If I had to rank the shows from best to worst, I'd say they're Le Nouveau Paris, then École de Paris, then Guka and Uka Kenran, TV, New York, New York, Sumire, and lastly the movie. If you're a fan of the series, I very highly recommend you check out the Paris Kageki-dan once. Or the uneducated ones, Paris Floral Assault Troop. They're definitely worth your time. And with that, I've done it. I have covered every game, main spin-off, and anime. So was it worth it in the end? I mean, kind of. It's hard to say. On one hand, I did just cover almost a decade worth of media in the span of 2 months. But on the other, there was a lot of stuff here that I really enjoyed. If any of the things I talked about today even slightly interest you, then I very heavily recommend checking them out. Be it a long-time fan or a first-time player, I think that throughout the series' very long and varied history, there's definitely something here that most people will enjoy. There's pretty much everything covered, from strategy RPGs to dating sims to mysteries to puzzles to action to dungeon crawling. It's all there! If you've played a Sakura Wars game before, or have gotten an interest in the series, then please feel free to go down in the comments and leave a comment. I'm really curious about what you have to say. Cheers, and please do me a favor here. Have a fantastic day. Wow, I can't believe you actually watched this far. This is the part of the video where I just kind of ramble on about the last year, but I'm not gonna do that. Instead, I'm gonna thank you. Thank you for watching this video. It's been in the making for a very long time, and I would also like to explicitly thank Tony4U and Petrock for helping me out with the script, just kind of reading over it, telling me what I could improve. I really wanted to make this video as best as I can, and I hope I achieved that. I hope I got you interested in the series and, hell, maybe an entirely new genre. With that out of the way, once again, I know I already said it, but once again, please have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again sometime in another video. Cheers.